All right, can you guys hear me now? This should have fixed it. Audio, yeah, it looks like the audio is working now. Is the audio working? Audio, we should be back. You guys can hear me? Yes, we're here. We're live. I fixed it. All right, perfect. Figured out what the problem was, and we have audio. Well, that will make this a little bit more enjoyable and valuable for you. As fun as it is to see my arms moving around and me waving a sword around, it's not as useful without the words. So I'm glad we got the words. I'm glad we got the opportunity to talk to you guys today. This is a fun. For those of you who are just tuning in for the first or second time, maybe I decided to do these power calls a while back because I decided that it would be one of the best gifts I could give you guys as you're going through the program to help you progress through quickly, to learn faster, to get to that first client faster would be to just hold a quick daily 5, 10, 15-minute call with you guys where I can share key insight. We can all remember, you and every other student across the world who is in the program right now can remember that they're not alone, right? They're not the only one who switched on. They're not the only one who's pushing forward. They're not the only one who's in the game. You might walk through the world and your family, your friends, and everyone else might be living normal little happy lives, and they might be completely happy with that, but you might feel alone in the fact that you are pushing forward as quickly and as ferociously as you can towards financial freedom and towards greater happiness in your life. And they aren't. And that can feel lonely. I remember what it felt like to be in that spot. And I figured that it would be fun to do these calls just to give us a chance to all gather together as people who are on the same path and to just dump as many valuable nuggets of wisdom as I possibly could for you guys. So yesterday we talked about testosterone and about how to create a virtuous cycle of increased testosterone in your life so you win more and so you can attack the path a little bit better. Today we're going to talk about the D word. I'm going to talk about dopamine. Now, there's probably some of you guys who have geeked out a lot about dopamine in the past. You probably have researched it quite a bit. You've probably heard about dopamine fasting, all that sort of stuff. I'm not going to be a crazy geek about it today. I'm not going to dive into it. I'm sure there's some of you, even on this call, who have a significantly more advanced, done like a detailed level knowledge of dopamine. And we're going to talk about it, but I'm really just going to give you a key to how to just put it in your favor, right? So let's see here. I'm going to ask a question for you guys. Okay, you're tracking on the dopamine now. We'll wait for a second. So dopamine is the neurotransmitter, the thing that happens and it fires off in your brain whenever you're chasing or get something good, right? So a few examples of this. Like if you rewind it back a long time ago, when you were hunting, you have like a little drip of dopamine as you're like chasing your prey. And then when you killed the prey and started eating it, huge spike of dopamine, right? Today's world, there's a lot of ways that people get dopamine. People who do drugs get a huge hit of dopamine right off the bat, depending on the drug you're using. So it's a really powerful form of motivation, and it's kind of behind every major addiction today. There's some level of dopamine release that happens on the back end. But dopamine is, let's say, it's like the neurotransmitter of motivation. It's what draws you towards an action. It's what makes the action worthwhile. It's sort of the reward your brain gets for doing something meaningful. The problem is that in today's world, dopamine is extremely readily available. Back in the day, if you wanted dopamine, let's say you were a caveman sitting around, you're like, man, I want another hit of dopamine. You know what you would have to do? And to get up, you'd have to go out into the wilderness with your boys. You have to like run through the bush, climb up over mountains, spot an elk, and start chasing that thing down. Maybe fight a saber-toothed tiger off, win, get your elk, and then you get a nice big hit of dopamine. And it would mean a lot to you. That'd be a huge spike of dopamine compared to like your average everyday moment of your life. It would feel amazing, right? It would be huge, absolutely huge. So that's what you used to have to do. There was a significant amount of effort that you have to put in to get dopamine. But today, we live in a world where dopamine can be completely and entirely divorced from effort, right? Back then, it was connected to effort. You had to go through effort to get dopamine. Today, all you have to do is pick up your phone, right? Your phone is a major dopamine, like super conduit into your brain, right? You can pick up your phone, nice bright colors. You can get on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, whatever, and scroll. And you can just get hit after hit after hit after hit of dopamine, right? every single piece of content that is on that platform is designed to give you a giant spike of dopamine, at least the successful content, right? So you can sit there without doing any work, without chasing any elks, without fighting off any saber-tooth tigers, and you can just enjoy dopamine hit after dopamine hit after dopamine hit. So there's that. There's like, we have extremely delicious foods that are like trigger insane amount of dopamine, especially like the snacks, chips, stuff like that, cookies, candy, all this stuff is designed to give you an insane amount of dopamine, right? It's so easy, right? If you, let me show you kind of how, here's an illustration of maybe how you might be, you might be seeking out more dopamine than you're currently, than you might think, right? If you can't sit still and eat food without being on your phone, without watching something, without having something on in the background, chances are you're in like a high, like desperation for dopamine. You're chasing that dopamine really, really heavily, right? The problem with this, right? I mean, it is what it is, right? People, there's a lot more dopamine floating around the world. It's a lot easier to get dopamine now, but the problem is that it's separated from effort. So a lot of people, instead of going through the hard work to earn a good reward, to earn a life that's worthwhile, they settle for short-term dopamine hits that are instantly available, right? This is probably it's no clearer than when you sit down to do a deep work session, and you're about 2 seconds in and it starts to get difficult. The dopamine dries up and you immediately reach for your phone. You immediately reach for the distraction. You immediately reach for another cheaper source of dopamine, right? Imagine there are 4 gas stations in a town, right? And at 3 of those gas stations, a gallon of gas is $5 a gallon, right? But let's say there's another one where a gallon of gas is $1 a gallon, right? Everyone in town is going to go to the $1 a gallon gas station because it's the cheapest, right? Human behavior typically flows to the cheapest available form of dopamine. Like, where can I go to get dopamine for the least amount of effort? So when you sit down and you're comparing, the hard work you have to do inside of this program to learn a skill, to develop it, to do prospecting, reach out, to do sales calls, all that stuff, compared with the short-term, quick, fast dopamine that you get from your phone, most people will just slide to the easy behavior. So are you hopeless? Are you stuck? Is there nothing you can do because you're addicted to dopamine? No, there's an answer. There's a way to fix this without cutting yourself off and turning yourself into a geek monk who floats around in the world without eating delicious foods or anything like that. The secret is, well, before you understand that, the key, you need to understand that you still have an ability to override that function. You can override the need for dopamine, right? You can choose to do something that's boring, even though it's not something that you're going to get dopamine for, and you can force yourself to do it just because you have basically 2 minds. You have the higher mind, the lower mind. The higher mind can overcome and force the lower mind to do something that it needs to do when necessary, right? So you can sort of overcome just by completely ignoring dopamine in your life, which is kind of effective, but there's a better way that sort of aligns those 2 minds towards pushing you towards achieving your financial freedom and what you want. And here's how you do it. You simply only allow yourself to consume cheap dopamine after you've completed effort, after you've done hard work, right? For example, let's say you have a couple of days left on the boot camp and you haven't gotten through them. You might tell yourself, okay, I'm going to finish a day's worth of work inside of the boot camp, and then I'll let myself go on YouTube and play around on YouTube for 15, 20 minutes, right? You allow yourself to consume that cheap dopamine, but only after you've put in work, right? What that does is it rewires your brain and it flips you back to the old school way of thinking where you're like, okay, if I want dopamine, I have to go out and do some work for it first. I have to put in the effort. And what that's going to do is it's going to massively reduce the amount of like cheap dopamine you consume anyways. You're going to realize it's not really worth it. And then what it's going to do is it's going to massively increase the amount of effort you put out in the world, right? Which is going to mean you're going to have more results. You're going to be able to level yourself up. And you'll also be able to sort of use this cheap dopamine that's just floating around the world to your advantage instead of against you, like it is now. If you sit back without actively controlling the way you consume dopamine, without any kind of awareness based on what we've talked about today, you'll slide into the path of least resistance, which means you'll probably end up fat, lazy, and poor, right? But if you can step back, you can control and realign your focus to where you only allow yourself to consume cheap dopamine after you've put in a significant amount of work, then you can leverage that power towards propelling you towards a better and higher version of yourself, where you can actually go through the boot camp, you can actually get inside of a legion, you can actually reach out and land clients, perform projects, upsell them, and make your way to 10K a month and more inside of the program. But it's always going to be dependent on your ability to step back and align dopamine, align that motivation, align that reward system to be aligned with the actions you need to take. You allow yourself to consume the dopamine, allow yourself to enjoy it, because it's cool. There's nothing wrong with dopamine. There's nothing wrong with consuming it, as long as you only allow yourself to do so after you've put in the effort. It's a simple idea, simple mindset shift, but it's based on this awareness of how your brain works and how dopamine works. Now, some of you are really intelligent. You're understanding how you can use dopamine as a marketer to reward your readers and how to drag them up the value ladder. But I'm not going to talk about that in detail today. Maybe that's a topic for another day. But I encourage you guys, every time you get the urge to consume some type of cheap dopamine, you say, first I'm going to do this. Or when you know you have a lot of work you need to do and you don't really want to do it because it's a lot of work, you say, I'm going to do that work and then I'm going to let myself do X, right? Use dopamine to drag you up the path. If you feel the urge to use dopamine, or use your phone or something like that, make it conditional on new effort and you'll find yourself increasing. It could be as simple as, sure, I'll do that, but first 25 extra push-ups right now. Simple. That starts to add up. That starts to give you a lot of benefits. So actively think about how you're going to start rewiring your brain to only consume dopamine after you've done effort. So the little exercise I encourage you all to do is to sit down, think of something difficult you need to do, break it down into a manageable chunk, and then decide what type of dopamine you're going to allow yourself to consume after you complete that chunk. Write it down and then do it, right? If you take the principle I've explained to you today, you will fix the I'm not motivated, this is boring, how do I get through it? That will be changed forever for you. And instead, you're going to be actively chasing dopamine in a way that produces significant results in your life on like a foundational level. This is key. This is important stuff. It's again, people have geeked out a whole lot about it. There's a lot more detail about how dopamine works and how to do that. That's useful, but really, if you can just use the simple practice I've laid out to you, you're going to get 99% of the benefit that would come from spending 20, 30, 40 hours studying the stuff. So use the simple method to organize your tasks and to give yourself a dopamine reward in order to get the most out of life. My friends, it's been a good call. We'll be doing this again tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going to keep talking about neurotransmitters. We might run out pretty quickly, but this has been a helpful one, I think, for some of you. I'm excited to see what you guys do with it. We'll probably be having a discussion about this inside of the Mindset channel. So let's move there. And this has been a good call, and I will talk to you guys again tomorrow.